What is up, everybody? Doomwake here, and welcome back to another video on the channel. I just got back from another RCQ, and I'm happy to report that after 3 finals losses, I was finally able to get there, and I did it with this little beauty. Now, we don't usually do these kinds of videos in the channel, kind of like deck profile sort of things, but I'm feeling pretty good. I just won an RCQ, so I wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of where I'm at with the Rakdos Sacrifice deck, and maybe kind of some of the card choices, talk a little bit about the tournament, just kind of some overall stuff. When it comes to the RCQ specifically, my matchups today were Rakdos Goblins round 1, I beat them 2-1, then I beat Soulflayer round 2, 2-1, I played against round 3. Round 3 was Greasefang, 2-0. Draw because it was 5 rounds. And then in top 8, I beat Boats, Goblins again, and Goblins again. So, yes, you heard that correctly. I played against Goblins 3 times today, which, to be fair, if I'm playing the Mayhem Devil Fatal Push deck, it's probably a good thing, and that's probably why I won the tournament. But hey, you gotta get lucky with pairings to win a tournament sometimes. As far as the deck itself, Rakdos Sacrifice, I think if the regional championship was tomorrow, so by the way, for those of you who don't know, the tournament that I won qualifies me to play in the regional championship in Atlanta. So if you're going to be there, I'll see you there. Would love to sign some cards. Come say hi. And if that tournament was tomorrow, I'd honestly probably just run back the same 75. This deck has felt incredible. I think I've played it in the last like 3 or 4 RCQs, and I top 8'd 3 of those. So pretty good track record. Yeah, deck's great. As far as the individual card choices, nothing too crazy going on here. So 3 Cauldron Familiar. You don't really want to play 4 copies because it can get kind of clunky sometimes. Like, the only thing that you can actually get it back with is Oven, because it's the only thing that makes food. So you don't really want to get clogged up on Cauldron Familiars if you draw 2. You don't really have a lot of ways to turn the second one into a real card or use it advantageously, to the point where I've actually been considering going down to 2, but you do want to see 1 a game, so I think 3 is the right number. It's like, you'll notice there's, in the 1-drop slot, there's like a slew of all 3 ofs here, and then a bunch of 4 ofs, and I think it's because those cards specifically, you want to draw exactly 1 copy a game, and typically, with 3 ofs compared to 4 ofs, that's like the right number. You want to, you'll see 1 a game. So I think 3 is right, could see 2, it's kind of close, really on the fence about that. And then the interactive suite here, so we have 3 Fatal Push, 3 Thoughtseize. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember exactly when it happened, but I want to say it was about 6 or 7 months ago when so for those of you who don't know, the Thoughtseizes main deck have kind of become stock in RakSac now, but before, people used to just sideboard them, and, at the end of the day, if you're bringing in Thoughtseize in every matchup, well, you just main deck it. And it really kind of turned this deck from a deck that was more reliant on the sacrifice aspects to a deck that was kind of like a mid-range deck first and foremost, that just had some sacrifice elements added to it. So you can play a lot more of a mid-range game with stuff like Fable and Harvester. Another thing that Thoughtseize does very importantly is hand knowledge. So not only do you get to, look at your opponent's hand, take their best card, or whatever might be best for the situation, you also know exactly what they're going to be playing the next couple of turns. Example, in the top 8 of my RCQ today, I thought to use my Boat's opponent, and I saw they had a Blood Scythe Harvester. Sorry. I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself here. I thought to use my opponent. I saw they had a Bone Crusher Giant, and I had a Blood Scythe Harvester on turn 2. And if I play the Blood Scythe Harvester, they have a really clean target for their Stomp, which is getting them a ton of value. So I just said, you know what? Not going to play my Harvester on 2. I'll just do something else. Maybe I think I played an Oven on turn 2 and then played it on turn 3. Really important thing about that matchup is if you have Oven, play it before your creatures, because that almost turns off their Bone Crusher Giant, because if they stomp something, like if they stomp a creature and you sack it in response, they don't get to play the Bone Crusher half of, it doesn't go to the Adventure Zone. So keep that in mind. And then 3 copies of Fatal Push. It's weird because Rakdos midrange almost always will play 4 copies, and we are trying to make this deck kind of more like a midrange deck. The thing about Fatal Push is you have enough ways to incidentally answer elves already between Mayhem Devil, Harvester, and Claim the Firstborn. There, you don't need to draw a ton of Fatal Pushes against green, and honestly, you don't want to get clogged on them, because if you draw too many pushes and their hand is like Wolful Haven into Karn, then you're just going to kind of look like an idiot with all these Fatal Pushes in your hand. So you don't want to draw a ton against them. I think 3 is the right number. Again, that's one where I could definitely see the 4th copy coming in. Maybe you put it in the sideboard if you wanted to just have it against certain matchups, but that's pretty close. And then Claim the Firstborn, amazing card. One thing that's really nice about Claim is when you're on the draw against mono green, if you have Claim the Firstborn and Witch's Oven, but you don't have Fatal Push, they play an elf, you steal their elf, elf has haste, use it for green mana, play the oven with the green mana, tap the oven, sack the elf. So even if you're on the draw against an elf without a Fatal Push, you can still kill it with Claim. And that's another reason why we don't need the full 4 Fatal Pushes. I'll say that 10 times fast. Next up, Unlucky Witness. This is kind of your best one drop. So your best sequence most of the time in most matchups is going to be turn 1 Unlucky Witness, turn 2 Deadly Dispute, sacrifice it. It allows you to see so many cards. You get the Unlucky Witness trigger, you get the draw 2 of Dispute, you get to also make a treasure token. So it's probably your best way to just see the most amount of cards, and every time you get the traded Unlucky Witness for any one of your opponent's game pieces, even if it's just a token, you're just up a card in the exchange. So great card. Definitely would probably never cut a copy. I have experimented with 3 in the past, but card's great. Definitely for now I think I like 4 copies. And then Witch's Oven, arguably the best card, one of the best cards in the deck. Definitely never cut an oven. It works extremely well with Cauldron Familiar. I'm sure you've all seen that before. And it works extremely well with Claim the Firstborn. Even the thing that I mentioned about turning off Bonecrusher Giant, that's huge in the Rakdos midrange mirror. If you lead on Oven, their Bonecrushers can never target your creatures. They have to go upstairs if they want to just, deal the 2 damage, then also play the Bonecrusher. So, very good card against Bonecrusher. Phenomenal card. Don't play less than 4. Deadly Dispute. Card's great. Your best, your cleanest 2 for 1. It's not always 100% a direct 2 for 1, because sometimes you're sacrificing a real material, but a lot of the time, especially because you can sack an artifact, you can get rid of a token you got off a Bloodtithe Harvester, maybe a food token that you got for free in an exchange somewhere, just some random game object that you just happen to acquire. Card's great, and obviously works very well with Claim the Firstborn. Similar to the Claim plus Oven thing, if you're on the draw against green on turn 2, you claim their elf, tap the elf for mana, with your second land as black, Deadly Dispute, sack the elf. So another way to turn Claim into a removal spell if you don't have a Fatal Push for an elf. Bloodtithe Harvester. This is kind of another one where I feel like at first Rakdos Sacrifice decks were not playing Bloodtithe Harvester, and I can't remember the exact point where they started playing it. It almost feels like when Rakdos midrange picked up in popularity, that's kind of when the Sacrifice decks also started adapting it, because I want to say a year ago, I don't think I was playing this card in Sacrifice, but it's great. It also works extremely well with Fable the Mirror Breaker, being able to give you this awesome thing that you want to copy. It leaves a permanent around for something to sacrifice to Deadly Dispute. Card's great. And one other very important aspect about Harvester, it's 2 mana for 3 power. And a lot of your not bad matchups, but not great matchups are Mono Green Lotus Field, decks that kind of race you in a way that it's harder for you to interact with. Bloodtithe Harvester is just your best 2-drop, because it applies pressure, it forces them to do things that they maybe don't want to do and play a little bit faster, and gives you the ability to race those decks when you wouldn't normally have that. Next up we have Akroxa. A lot of people ask me about what are the flex spots in this deck, what are the cards that I think you could potentially cut, and the only thing that kind of comes to mind, if you look at the deck, it's all 3 and 4 ofs, the numbers are all pretty tight. This is one that I think could maybe be on the chopping block, but this card does so much. It's just absolutely insane. Turn 2, you can go turn 1 Oven, It has 6 toughness, so you can go Oven on 1, and then you play Croaks on 2 with the trigger on the stack, sacrifice it to the Oven to get an extra food, because Oven is worded where if the creature's toughness has 4 or more, you get 2 foods instead of 1, so it's a good way to get a bunch of value. It's a very good discard to something like a Fable or a Harvester Blood token to just be able to recur it later. You can also do some cool things where if you're super late into a game and you have enough cards in the graveyard, you can like escape a Croxa, attack with it, sacrifice it to Oven just to cast it again to get another ETB trigger. You can do some really cool stuff there. Just great card. I think it's like the perfect one of. Would never want to draw 2 copies of Croxa, but the first one's pretty good. Fable the Mirror Breaker. Do I need to say anything? I mean, just the best card in the format. It's also exceptional in this deck. You have the Fable copy Bloodside lines, but also copying Mayhem Devil is busted because Fable sacrifices the creature at the beginning of the next end step, which just for some reason triggers Mayhem Devil. Card's great. Even just copying like an Unlucky Witness to get an extra card. Again, same thing. The token from Unlucky Witness gets sacrificed at the next end step, so it actually triggers Witness, even if you don't have a sack outlet. So, Fable, good card. I don't think you need me to tell you that. Mayhem Devil, again, just a cornerstone of the deck. Would never shave a copy of this. I'd probably play 8 if they let me, but they only let you play 4. So, yeah, played before Mayhem Devil. Good with Fable. Not much else to say. Just like one thing that I will say about Mayhem Devil in terms of play patterns, it's the card that you usually want to cast last. So if you have literally anything else to do in your hand, you most likely will want to do it, whatever you can before you play Mayhem Devil. Okay, against decks that have removal, because if your opponent's playing Lotus Field or whatever and they can't kill it, who cares? You're not going to lose anything by playing it. But if you're playing against a deck that has like a Fatal Push or some way to interact with it, if you play it too early and without enough stuff in play to be able to get some kind of value off of it, or at least deal them, 5 or 6 damage, they're just going to kill it. And what are you getting out of your Mayhem Devil? So really think about how the board state is. If you can afford to let them trade for the Devil and you're not getting a ton of value out of it. So really keep that in mind. Try to wait as long as you can to cast this in those circumstances, but think about stuff like that. Here's the other flex spot, Furnace Reigns. I think this was mostly a concession to the green matchup when it was added to the main deck, because Claim the Firstborn only steals CMC 3 or less, so this is a way to steal something like a Cavalier of Thorns or a Cityscape Leveler. You could even steal something like an Atraxa, but I don't know. I don't think you necessarily need this. This is definitely the card that I'm considering cutting for like the 4th copy of Push or the 4th copy of Thoughtseize. If I were to add something in, it's definitely the first card that would go. I don't know. It's okay. I'm not like I could take it or leave it kind of thing. It's fine. It's just, it's a cool one-off because it gets you out of a lot of tight spots, like especially if the green decks are continuing to main deck Cityscape Leveler, which they have as of late. Not going to touch too much in the mana base. One thing I will say, please, for the love of God, do not play Castle Lochthwain. The amount of times, I played a tournament RCQ today and an RCQ yesterday. The amount of times that this came into play tapped versus the amount of times that I actually activated it, the gap is astronomical. Like, this is just a swamp that enters the battlefield tapped, and it really doesn't do anything. The other thing is, like, even in spots where you would be able to activate it, you have so many other things to do with your mana. You have 4 creature lands, blood tokens from Bloodscythe Harvester, Gigantha, Croxa. There's just infinite things to do with your mana. I really don't think this card's worth it. Probably going to try adding like a 3rd Springs or a 3rd Blackleaf Cliffs, but yeah, even though I had an ETB swamp, I still was able to win the tournament, so that goes to show you how good the deck is. Sideboard. Sideboard is kind of up in the air, so I do think that the Gigantha is a lock, as, the Leyline of the Voids. I don't want to call them a lock, but I think it does shore up a lot of your, like, I don't know if it shores up a lot of your weak matchups, because I don't think you're that bad against Greasefang and Phoenix anyways, but think of it as a way to kind of turn a 50-50 matchup into like an 80-20 matchup, and if those matchups are close enough and it hits enough things, then I think that is worth the 4 sideboard slots. Yes, I understand that you have to give up Gigantha, but a lot of times the decks that you want Leyline of the Void against aren't typically decks that you would be going towards Gigantha in a game anyway, so I think that's fine. The Obnixes I do love quite a bit. They're very good against control, very good against like the other grinding mid-range decks. The rest of this sideboard, could take it or leave it. Damping Sphere is mostly here as a concession to Lotus Field, but if you don't expect to play against Lotus Field, you could certainly replace that with something else. As far as the sideboard removal spells are concerned, I think like the Edict and the Abrade are pretty good. What I tried to do with the removal spells is kind of split them up so that they're good against the creature decks, but they also have applications elsewhere. So something like Shieldred's Edict, it's a good, good against boats, good against any deck that's playing creatures, but also happens to be good against blue-white control because you make them sacrifice their Teferi or Wandering Emperor, which, well, I think blue-white control is not a great matchup. So it's kind of a way to get a small percentage gain in a bad matchup, but also still have a removal spell for the creature decks. Think of, little stuff like that. Same with the Braid. Braid's good against all the creature decks, also is a shatter against boats, because your deck can't kill a Sky Sovereign, which is another reason why I also played a Cole against Command. Same thing, good against the creature decks, good in the grindy matchups, like against Control and RakDos or Rakdos Midrange, but also a way to kill boat, which your deck typically will struggle with. The games you lose to red-green boats usually involve them having a Sky Sovereign, so that's something as well. Additional copy of Furnace Rains, good against green. I don't think there's a ton else I would bring this in against. Maybe like Weirdo, Atraxa, Neoform decks if those pop up again. But again, another card I could probably take or leave. And then 2 discard spells, the 4th Thoughtseize and I guess the 5th Thoughtseize in the form of Duress. I do think these 2 are kind of locked in. You really want more discard spells against blue-white control. So yeah, I mean, as far as the deck as a whole, I think the Damping Spheres, the Furnace Rains, and maybe the Kroxa, although I kind of want to keep the Kroxa. I think those are kind of like the cards I would consider cutting or maybe moving around if you wanted to try some new stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, deck felt really good. I am a really, really big fan of this. If the tournament was tomorrow, I would probably just run back the same 75, maybe change a couple of small sideboard changes, but yeah, I'm really, really excited to be qualified for Atlanta. I really hope that I am able to do well. I hope I see you guys there. Let me know in the comment section down below. Are you going to be in Atlanta? What'd you think of the video, too? What is this, like, kind of, I don't know what to call it, deck profile, deck doctor thing style video? Let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.